Is Sony Mirrorless falling behind? And we talk about the Canon 1DX Mark III and all of this. Stay tuned. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's that one camera guy back at again with just kind of a talking head video for you. Kind of just listen in. But I wanted to go ahead and address this because the 1DX Mark III was just announced recently with all its specification. And I'll be honest, I was very blown away about what Canon did. And the way I see it is Canon wanted to make a statement. They wanted to make a statement that they were not the underdog, that they were still the top dog in the market, that they could deliver on a real flagship camera. I think most of us can agree to some extent that with Sony's A9 Mark II, which this is just the Mark I, that it was a little bit lackluster. It almost seemed as if Canon was like, yeah, we're pretty good. No one's caught up with this yet. Let's just go ahead and release a sideways update, which is their A9 Mark II. There really wasn't any necessarily standout features in that camera, and they really let the video side of things kind of fall in the back burner. But you know what? Canon said, screw that. We're going to drop everything that we can into this one camera. Not only did they boast incredible photo capabilities at 16 frames per second mechanical, 20 in live view, high-end raw recording, 5.5K raw recording, and also the CF Express, dual CF Express slots for this newer generation of media recording. They definitely wanted to future-proof this camera for the next few years, quite a few years. So with all of that said, is this Canon's last flagship DSLR? I really want you to let me know down below if you think this is the case. And the reason why I think it could be is that it seems as if Canon went to the drawing board after the A9 was announced and they saw all those feature specifications and they saw the writing on the wall. Because at this point, you know Canon's been investing in mirrorless tech. They're building out their lens sets and everything like that. And they know that mirrorless is the future at this point. I think that they're going to agree on that at this point. They said, if this is going to be our last DSLR, let's just go ahead and drop everything we can in it. High-end photo capabilities, high-end video recording options, the new generation media tech recording options with PCIe, with the CF Express. There's nothing like it right now on the market that does both really well. That's the thing I want to stress. Some cameras will do, one thing really well, but not the other. But this camera is a workhorse. It's the 1D, it's their flagship body. And that really got me excited about this. So if this is the last DSLR, it is a little sad, but at the same time, I'm glad it was this camera that Canon said, let's just make this it. And it's just really amazing what they were able to accomplish in this camera body. So here's the thing. Is it enough for Canon to release this camera? I would say probably not, but hopefully, and when I say it's not enough, it seems as if this camera is really designed to stop the bleeding on the high-end market, the folks that shoot with the 1D series. I think they're trying to prevent people from saying, hey, come on down to Sony. Sony's got 20 frames per second, silent shutter, all this jazz, and all of a sudden, boom, you got 16 frames per second mechanical, 20 FPS, live view, continuous autofocus, silent shutter. They're offering nearly the same specifications and better features in certain cases, like mechanical shutters, which is great for strobe shooting, which is great for shooting in certain adverse lighting conditions. So Canon definitely has an edge here for certain users, and they really don't want to lose them. And also, the high-end video features will bring in a new clientele. This was sort of like the Canon 1D Cinema, you remember back in the day? And I owned that camera for a little while, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. But Canon just built a really strong hybrid camera that does both photos and videos at high levels. What does this camera mean for the future? It means that Canon definitely has some feature specifications. I will tell you, I'll be honest, I thought Canon was behind by a few years. It looks like they're already here. And it just hasn't trickled into a mirrorless body. But the fact that they were able to integrate certain mirrorless concepts and features in this DSLR shows that they have not been resting ever since Sony started to pick up steam. So it's very exciting to see where things are going to go. What I hope Canon does is that when their next EOS R comes around, or maybe they have another generation of a more consumer-based camera, that they can kind of compete with the A7 III. I don't just want it to be like, well, A7 III is the best consumer full-frame camera. It'd be nice if Canon had a well-built-out EOS R that can compete pound for pound with the A7 III. Some people like the EOS R, that's great. But in my opinion, when I used it, it was tough to use, especially being used to a Sony system with the speed and performance that it offered. I did try it out for 2 weeks. I never made a video specifically about it, but I just was personally not impressed with the EOS R. Now, granted, I never tried it with the new updates, but it doesn't change like the burst shooting or anything like that, which I was so comfortable with on the Sony system, being able to fire 10 frames per second. So I'm not saying I hate the camera or anything like that specifically. I'm just saying for me personally, it just wasn't, it was tough to go back to. It felt like an inferior tool to me. But there were some great things about it, I will tell you. There were some great things about it. But anyway, speaking about the future. So what I would like to see Canon bring in an EOS R, 10 FPS, silent shutter, high-end video, 4K 60p, 10-bit 422, maybe a jump to CF Express, who knows? Maybe a single CF Express slot with UHS-2. Who knows what might happen? But I think if Canon really wants to make a statement and really get on the floor with Sony, definitely don't cripple them to such a degree, and kind of bridge the gap between their camera lines to keep it all in one place. Not just sounding like me trying to say nice things about Canon. I am a Sony shooter, but I came from Canon, and I really don't care too much about the brand wars, so to speak. I care more about everyone benefiting from this. And trust me, I don't think Canon would have built the 1DX Mark III the way they did had Sony never existed or come into the picture. I mean, is that really hard for us to agree on? Because they did definitely react to certain things like the 20 frames per second electronic shutter that they have in the A9. Canon decided to put 20 frames per second in live view to match what the A9 had to offer. They could have just did 16 mechanical, 16 electronic viewfinder. They chose 20 specifically for Sony. Is Sony Mirrorless falling behind? I wouldn't say they're necessarily falling behind. They're still innovating on the software side with eye autofocus, video eye autofocus, animal eye autofocus. Anything that can improve the acquisition is always a plus. And I think in those areas, Sony hasn't really fallen back on. But in the war of cameras, they definitely lost this one, okay? With the A9 Mark II versus the 1DX Mark III, the 1DX Mark III is a superior camera in its own right. There are some benefits with the A9, there's some benefits with the 1DX, but overall, in the scheme of things, when you look at the two cameras together side by side, the 1DX Mark III is a much better tool for both advanced photo and advanced video. And Sony really used to be you would tout it as a really great hybrid camera, right? Great photos, great video, but now they've sort of fallen behind on sort of that ladder, where now you've got Canon offering some really high-end video features and high-end photo options in one singular body. My biggest concern is now that with the A9, if you want great photo and video options, you're going to have to mix cameras together. You're going to have to get the A7S III plus another body, like an A7R4. So you can't have it all in one body system. I don't know what the A7S III is going to look like at the end, but it looks like they really need to step it up for that A7S III. But the A7S III isn't going to be an A9 Mark III. So it's going to be definitely video-centric. Now, I don't know what the exact specs, like I said, are going to be at, but it's going to leave it in a weird place. And I was really hoping Sony would have just knocked the floor out and revamped some things like higher FPS options, higher video options. Because Sony, for whatever reason, they're protecting the A9. They're not giving it the video features. It's lacking picture profiles, 4K 60p, all these other things, which I think they're all probably capable of doing, but they're definitely holding back substantially in that particular department. There's something up that's going on, and I hope it doesn't bite them in the ass later, unfortunately. Okay, so some areas of improvements, like I think I mentioned already: touchscreen interface, buffer performance, improvements to the menu system. There's little things that Sony can do to keep on improving so that they don't fall too behind in comparison to their competitors. My thing is that Canon has the tech. They have the technology. They're building out their lens lineup. If Sony doesn't take them seriously, they're going to come in real quick. And by the way, we all benefit. I just want to stress that we all benefit from the competition. Remember, competition's always great for the consumer at the end of the day. So final thoughts, just remember, just because maybe you own the Sony a6000, it doesn't mean that your camera got any worse or got any, became terrible. The camera still does amazing stuff. It takes great photos, does great video. It has some limitations compared to the newer generation, but as long as you understand those limitations, those cameras are still great. Don't feel the need that you got to keep upgrading. I just want to stress that to you because we talk about gear a lot, and that gear acquisition syndrome. Just keep on using the gear you have and maybe update a lens once or twice here or there to get better performance in certain environments. But we just love talking about gear, and I wanted to point that out. So let me know down below, do you think Sony Mirrorless is falling behind? And in what areas you think that might be? I would love to know your thoughts on that. And that's going to do it for me, guys, in this video. Let me know your thoughts. Smash that like button, get subscribed, and I'll see you in the next video.